Professor Wu for the kind invitation. This is my second time to KAIST, and I'm very happy to be here. Actually, this is my third time to be Daijun. My first time to Daijun is about 18 years ago when I was a kid. At that time, I attended a mathematics competition organized by the Korean Mathematics Society. So it's quite a long ago. And today I will present some recent results on the well-posedness and long-time behavior for a model for the vesicle membrane with fluid interactions. So the outline of my talk will be like this. First, I will briefly introduce the model, and then we present the phase field approximation of the original model. And then finally, we give the main results and give the simple idea of the proof. So in this talk, we will study the evolution of the vesicle membrane. So basically, you can look at the picture. Membrane is a very important part in our body. It forms the cells and the vesicle, which has important biological actions. And the structure of the vesicle membrane is quite simple. It's just a two-layer made from the lipid, and it presents some important properties of the materials. For instance, the membrane can deform. It has the property of the elasticity, and actually in the two-layer structure, it can also slip like a fluid. So to study the properties of the deformation of this vesicle membrane has some important applications, not only in the biology. And here we start from the very simple thing. We do not consider the two-layer structure of the membrane. We consider the membrane like it's 2D. We consider the problem in 3D, so the membrane is a closed 2D surface. And in order to describe the shape of the membrane, in the 19th century, in the 1970s, Cohen and Havrish introduced the following elastic energy of this closed surface. So here are some parameters. For instance, gamma, we use gamma denoted the vesicle membrane, and the K0 and K bar are some constant which stand for the bending rigidities. And H is just the mean curvature, and K, capital K, is the Gauss curvature. And C0 is some spontaneous curvature which describe the symmetry, asymmetry effect of the membrane. And actually this Z0, when it takes different values, it will give you different shapes of the membrane. So how to find the shape of the membrane? We first consider equilibrium configuration. In order to find the shape of the membrane, we just minimize the bending elastic energy. Here we take the simplest form. And for the cell, we think that this cell has a fixed volume and a fixed area. So we have two constraints. Then you can write down the Euler-Lagrangian equation with respect to these two constraints. Then it's basically a fourth order quasi-linear elliptic equation with two Lagrangian multipliers. And here, Laplace gamma is basically a Laplace spectrum operator on the surface. And this equation is highly nonlinear, and it's very difficult to solve it. And only some special solutions has been constructed in the literature by several authors. So for instance, we just give an example. When the spontaneous curvature Z0 is not 0, then in the 1993, those authors find a special solution of the membrane shape, which is exactly the blood cell. So it's a biconcave shape. And actually, when people change the constraint on the spontaneous curvature and the surface area and the volume, then the shape, the equilibrium shape of the membrane will change. So for instance, this is from the experiment. And when you fix the surface area and you decrease the volume of the cell, then you can see that the equilibrium shape will change. Okay, before we talked about the equilibrium configuration, and how about the dynamics? In order to, because the Euler-Lagrange equation is highly nonlinear and it's very difficult to solve it, so a natural idea to get the equilibrium configuration is to use the gradient approach. So we can take, for the average elastic energy, we can take its L2 gradient flow like this. And people expect that as time goes to infinity, then the solution of this evolution equation will converge to one of the equilibrium shape of the membrane. However, this problem is still highly nonlinear and only partial results on the, for instance, the local well-posedness has been obtained by several authors in the literature. And we just remarked that the L2 gradient flow of the Helfrich functional is also related to some geometric flow in the literature, for instance, the surface diffusion flow and also the Wilmot flow. And you can see from the expression that this Helfrich gradient flow seems more complicated than the other two. Okay, now we want to, because you can imagine in our body, the cells are in the blood, so it's in the fluid. So we want to consider the interactions between the cell and our, between the cell and the fluid. So, and in this case, in order to describe the interactions between the cell and the fluid, we need to compute the force between them. So basically speaking, the force can consist of three parts: the elastic normal force due to the deformation, and the surface tension due to the surface and the volume constraint, and also the pressure due to the volume constraint. So it consists basically, when you do the variation, then it consists of three parts. So it's highly nonlinear, and there are only very recently, only local well-posedness results can or obtained by a group in Peking University. Yeah. So, because in the previous models, people regard the membrane as a 2D closed surface in the fluid, and when you try to solve the equation, you have to track the deformation of the surface, and you have to compute the position of the surface. So it's very difficult from the mathematical point of view, and it's even more difficult for the numerics. So alternatively, in the literature, another approach was introduced to describe such kind of problem. For instance, the phase field approach. So in this approach, instead of tracking the surface, we just introduce a phase function phi on the computational domain omega. And here it's a picture. Inside we can let this phase function to be 1 or positive, and outside to be -1 or negative. And the membrane is just represented by the zero level set of this indicator function. And still, this is the level set approach, and it's still difficult. So we do the regularization. This is called a diffuse interface. So we replace the membrane with zero thickness by a thin layer. This layer is approximated by a small parameter epsilon. And then we can approximate the formation of the membrane by a smooth function called phase field function. And when epsilon goes to 0, you can, at least formally, you can think that this diffuse interface formulation will converge to the sharp interface level set formation. And there are several advantages for the phase field approach. For instance, instead of tracking the surface, you just calculate the value of the indicator function. Then you look at the 0 point of the 0 values for the phase field function, and it represents the position of the membrane. So this is much more easier for numerics. Okay, so we just present this in the simplest form. Here we consider the original elastic energy, and in the phase field approach we can approximate it by the following energy. Consists of the phase field function phi, and we have two constraints on the volume and the surface. So the volume is approximated by this one, and the surface area is approximated by the Ginzburg-Landau energy. So what happens when we let the thickness of the layer go to 0? Formally, we can show that as epsilon goes to 0, this approximated energy will converging to the original elastic energy, and the surface approximated surface functional will convergence to the original surface area by some multiplied by some constant. And this argument was formally done by Changdu, Chunliu, and his collaborators in 2005, and some rigorous verification by the gamma convergence, gamma limit, is done by Belletti, Mugnai in 2010. So now we consider the membrane evolution using the phase field approach. First is equilibrium shape. We still minimize the approximated elastic energy subject to area and volume constraints. However, this is still, its Euler-Lagrangian equation is still highly nonlinear and it's difficult to solve. So we take the idea of a gradient flow. So consider the gradient flow, there are some existing results due to Colli and Lorenzo. For instance, they first consider a simpler case such that they remove the constraint on the surface, but just with the volume. Then they can show the existence of a global weak solution to the gradient flow for the approximated elastic energy. And then they consider a more complicated case such that with volume and area constraint. However, in that case, we have two Lagrangian multipliers, and this makes the problem very difficult. They can only show the existence of a global weak solution on the very strange case, such that the area is very large, then the volume is small. So you remember the photo I showed before, the shape of the cell is very strange. So I think this is just due to the difficulty from the mathematics. There's no reason you can do the strange thing, but you cannot do the similar results for the normal cell like a ball. So now we will focus on the evolution with fluid interaction. Basically, we will have two equations on the next page. The first equation is the incompressible Navier-Stokes equation for the fluid, but with a force due to the interaction between the cell membrane and the fluid. And the second one is the phase field equation, which is a gradient flow for the elastic energy, but with convection due to the fluid. So now we look at the hydrodynamic system. This one, a basic relation for the problem is the following basic energy law, such that here on the left-hand side is the total energy of the system. It consists of two parts. The first part is the kinetic energy, and the second part is approximated elastic energy. And on the right-hand side, you have two dissipation terms. The first one is due to the dissipation, due to the viscosity of the fluid, and the second one is due to the gradient flow of the system. So use an energetic variation approach, you can derive the following PDE system for the model. The first one is Navier-Stokes equation, but with induced elastic force, which can be obtained by the least action principle. So it looks quite complicated. And the third equation is just the gradient flow, L2 gradient flow, but under convection. And here, since this model is derived under two constraints, both on the surface and the volume, there is an algebraic equation for the two Lagrangian multipliers. So this is very difficult to solve the PDE system. You cannot solve the two Lagrangian multipliers elliptically, but it's nonlinearly coupled. So to the best of my knowledge, by so far there's no mathematical result on this kind of system. So to start, we start a simple model. We relax the two constraints on the surface and the volume. So we add two penalty functions. Here we just add two quadratic terms. And formally we let, if the energy is bounded and we let this m goes to plus infinity, then we will say that this area is conserved and the volume is conserved. They equal to alpha and beta, which are constants. And when we replace the original energy by this energy with penalty and use the same energetic variation approach, we can derive the Navier-Stokes equation with induced elastic force, and this is just the incompressibility of the fluid, and we have the gradient flow under convection. And for the sake of simplicity, here we just consider the problem in the periodic setting. And this is somehow still physical, because comparing with our body, the cell is very small. So you consider in a box there's a very small cell, and in general they will not. This cell will not touch the boundary. So still, I think periodic boundary conditions still make some sense. And of course, this is an evolution equation. We need some initial data. Okay, this is the PDE system we consider. So before we present our main results, and just recall some known results for that system. Some results has been obtained in the literature for the following deletionary boundary condition. They consider no slip boundary for the fluid, and a non-homogeneous deletionary boundary for the vis field, and this one is just imposed to make the compatibility. And in the paper by Changdu, Mai-Ling Li, and Chun Liu in 2007, they studied the existence of a weak solution, global weak solution, and they can show the uniqueness provided that this weak solution is more regular. And later, in another paper due to Yulin Liu and his collaborators in 2012, they can show the existence and uniqueness of local strong solutions. But in a restrictive fractional Sobolev space, the space cannot be very smooth. This is just due to their methods. They use some fixed point argument, and they want to map the space into itself. And besides that, they can prove the almost global solutions under assumption that the volume is small and the initial data is small. And the smallness of the initial data depends on the on the existing length of the solution. So it's just almost global. Okay, our main results are like this. This is a joint work with Shangshu in Fudan University. We first presented the global weak solution, which is easy. And then we studied the local strong solution in the arbitrary smooth space. And we provide some regularity criteria for the local strong solution. And then we studied the global existence of global strong solution under some special case. For instance, if the viscosity of the fluid is very large or the initial data is very close to equilibrium. And then finally, we give a result on the long-time behavior for any bounded global solution. So here is the classical functional setting of the Navier-Stokes equations. And as the starting point of the mathematics results, we recall that for our system, the total energy consists of two parts, the kinetic energy and the elastic energy. And then our system actually have the following basic energy law, such that the total energy is decreasing with respect to time. Now for the global weak solution, it's quite easy. From the basic energy law, we have the uniform bounds, which is uniformly in time. And based on this uniform estimate, we can use the Galerkin method to prove that for any initial data, U belongs to L2 and Y0 belongs to H2. Our system has at least one global weak solution, which is unique, provided that if the velocity have some additional regularity. But this is just a if result, it's not proved. And in order to study the existence of a strong solution, the key step is to observe that in this case, we have reversal regularity for the phase field. For instance, we can derive the following high order energy inequality, which tells us that if the initial data belongs to H2, then the third derivative of the phase function actually is uniformly bounded for positive time. And of course, if the initial data is more regular, then the H3 norm of the phase function is indeed bounded. And by Sobolev embedding, we have the L infinity norm of the gradient phi is also uniformly bounded. And these uniform bounds enable us to prove the following high order energy inequality. We introduced the quantity called A. Basically, it corresponds to the H1 norm of the velocity, and the variation of E basically corresponds to the H4 norm of the phase field. So if this quantity is uniformly bounded in time, which have been proved before, then we can have the following higher order energy inequality. And there are some interesting consequence of this high order energy inequality. The first one is the eventual regularity of the weak solution. We can show that for any global weak solution, when the time is sufficiently large, and this weak solution will become a stronger one. It will become regular. So it has a similar property for the single Navier-Stokes equations. So the key to the proof is very simple. We have the integrability of this quantity A, and we have this high order energy inequality. And combine these two, you can show that for when T is sufficiently large, then A is bounded. And the second consequence of the high order energy inequality is the local strong solution. So this is quite simple. And of course, this tells you that this regularity easily tells you that the local strong solution is indeed unique. However, since our system contains the Navier-Stokes equations as a subsystem, you cannot expect that for arbitrary initial data, we can have global strong solution. However, we can prove some regularity criteria for the local strong solution. This was inspired by the previous work due to Professor Zheng Lei and Yi Zhou. And actually, we can find that although our system looks much more complicated than the Navier-Stokes equation because due to the nonlinear coupling, however, it's not so bad. We can obtain exactly the same criteria for the local strong solutions as the Navier-Stokes equation. This means that in the nonlinear system, we consider the velocity field plays the dominant role. Okay, this is a local solution. Then we talk something about the global strong solution. The first one is if the viscosity of the fluid is sufficiently large, we can show that we can prove the following higher order energy inequality. We can show that if for any given initial data, if mu is sufficiently large, and of course the largeness of the mu is depend on the initial data, then we can prove the existence of a global strong solution. And alternatively, for instance, for the Navier-Stokes equation, the large viscosity is equivalent to small initial data. However, here it's not the case. So we consider the case near equilibrium. We just give a definition of the energy minimizer. So it's quite classical, and we can easily show that for the elastic energy we consider, there exists some energy minimizers. And our result is like this. For any epsilon larger than 0, there exists a small number. If the initial velocity is small and the initial data for the phase field is close to a certain energy minimizer, then we will have a global strong solution, which is still very close to the energy minimizer. The basic idea is by the Lojasiewicz-Simon approach. From the basic energy law, we can have the control of the L2 square from 0 to plus infinity. However, this does not tell you any useful information of the proof. So the key integrate is we can have such inequality called the Lojasiewicz-Simon inequality, which gives you the relation between the variation derivative and the difference of the energy. Then from this one, you can prove that for arbitrary S and T, this L1 integrability. And this one simply gives you the control of the length of the trajectory in the L2 norm. And this fact combined with the high order energy inequality helps you to control the distance between the solution and the energy minimizer in H2 norm. And this helps you to control that, okay, the solution will always stay in the neighborhood of the energy minimizer and it exists globally. Okay, the last result. We can show that for arbitrary global bounded solution, the velocity will converge to 0 and there exists a function phi infinity such that the global phase field function phi t will converge to that one. And we can give a convergence estimate on the convergence rate. And the proof is based consists of 3 steps. First one is due to compactness and the basic energy law, we have the convergence of the velocity. And due to compactness, we can say that for subsequence of time, we have the convergence. The point here is how can you show that the whole the convergence of for all time to this subsequent limit. So First, we can show that for sufficiently large time, the whole trajectory will be close to the subsequent limit. And then due to the Lojasiewicz-Simon inequality and combined with the basic energy law, we can show that this one is finite. And this tells you that phi is indeed convergent in L2 now. And due to compactness in H2, H3, you have the convergence in high order norm. Okay, that's the last, almost the last slide. The proof is non-trivial because the equilibrium for the equation is may be complicated because the energy is non-convex. And for the global solutions we obtained before, which is near the energy minimizer, we can show that the asymptotic limit is also a critical point, local minimizer of the energy. However, due to the complicated structure of the equilibrium set, they can be different. But anyway, our result tells you that they are very close. So our long-time behavior tells you that the local energy minimizer is indeed Lyapunov stable. And of course, if this energy minimizer is isolated, then they are the same. Then you have the asymptotically stable. Okay, some future work. We studied a simplified system. So it's interesting to study the original system with two constraints with interaction with the fluid. And we want to study the connection between the system with penalty and the original one, such that we take the penalty constant that goes to plus infinity to see whether the penalty solution to the penalty equation will go to the original one. And of course, another very difficult problem is when the thickness of the diffuse interface model goes to 0, what's the rigorous verification of this of the model? And in our case, we just consider the simplest case such that the spontaneous curvature equal to 0. However, the important case are provided by non-zero spontaneous curvature, such as the blood cell. So it's important to study the model for this case. And I just stop here. Thank you.